Hello and welcome back to photo retouching in Lightroom. My name is Aaron Nace of Phlearn.com and I'm so excited to be joining you today on Adobe Live. We are going to have a fantastic session today. We are going to be retouching images, all kinds of images from many different sources. We're going to be doing portraits, landscapes, environmental images. We're going to do underwater images, night shots. We're going to show you how to remove objects from the background. The whole goal of today's broadcast is to get you familiar with Lightroom Classic. So all of our Lightroom Classic users out there. Also, by the way, if you are using Lightroom CC or Lightroom Mobile, you're going to have access to a lot of these features as well. So we're going to have a really great stream. But my goal is whatever type of photography you are doing, I want to show you how to improve your photos. So before we get into today's class, let's take a look at our chat and see who's in our chat. I'm so excited to be joining you guys. This is the most fun ever. Good morning, Steve. Good morning, Valder. Cody Bear, happy Thursday, everyone. Cheryl, hey there, and can you believe it's Thursday already? This week is absolutely flying by. All right, Jurgen, good to see you. Valentina, how you doing? Vanessa, so cool. Hey, Barb. Hey, Alfred. Oh, we've got a lot of really fun people in the chat today, and we're gonna have a great time. So let's light it up in the chat. If you've got any questions during this broadcast, don't hesitate. I was gonna say, don't feel free to hesitate, which doesn't make any sense. Don't hesitate to ask, because I'm more than happy, and we've got some time built in. So really love those questions coming in. Mario from Italy, Dana, good to see you. Sunil, good greetings from London. Franchi Torres from Brazil, yes. We've got a really, really great broadcast for you today. Now, before we get into today's broadcast, let's go ahead and take a look at our schedule for the rest of the day. So we just saw our daily Photoshop Creative Challenge with Kathleen Martin. She was working on monograms, and I was really surprised, like in very short amount of time, she was able to create a really cool monogram. And I'm like, damn, Kathleen, I want you to work on my monograms. Can you do that for me? Next, we have our Illustrator Daily Creative Challenge with Andrew. Then we've got Editorial Design with Shanti, Adobe XD Creative Challenge with Andrea, some more Doodle Therapy with Alice Lee, and then our Design Off with Voodoo and Wade. Oh my gosh, it's going to be such a fun day. So make sure you stick around for today's entire broadcast. So what are we going to be covering today in our beautiful, beautiful live broadcast? Well, I've got my little notes here, so let's go ahead and pull these up. We're going to be doing HDR in Lightroom, and I discovered something literally this morning, okay, about HDR in Lightroom. I had no idea you could do this, and I'm so excited to share this technique with you. You can actually create HDR photos from a single exposure in Lightroom. So we're gonna show you how to do that today. And literally I discovered that this morning, so I'm super stoked on it. We're gonna show you how to do it from multiple photos as well. We're going to be showing you guys range masking in Lightroom. Now, range masking is a really great feature. It's one of the recently added features. Basically, this will allow you to only affect areas like your highlights or your shadows. So you can just really target areas that you want to actually affect with your tools. You can even affect color ranges. Like if you only want to affect your blues, you can do that as well with range masking. So we got some great examples coming up there as well. We're going to show you how to recover details in your highlights and shadows. So if you've ever taken a picture and your highlights are a little too bright, or maybe your shadows are a little bit too dark, we got you covered. You're going to be able to recover that detail here as well. We've got so many different things coming up. I want to get through all of this today, so we'll check out our timing. We're going to be working on removing objects and people from images as well. We've got some great travel photos from my buddy Pierre T. Lambert. We're going to be linking him up in the chat. And basically, we've got really, really great photos. I'm sure this has happened to you. It's definitely happened to me where we're at, you know, a beautiful landmark. We want to take a landscape photo and everything looks great, but maybe there's just some people or some trash or something in the photo you want to get rid of. So we're going to show you how to do that as well. We're going to show you how to add more emphasis and some really cool lighting effects to your night photography as well. So we've actually got some cool night photos. We're going to be adding some light streaks. We're going to be working on underwater photos also, show you how to boost your clarity and add a little bit more definition to those underwater images. Some night shots, we're going to show you how to enhance. We've got a really awesome photo of a volcano erupting that we're going to like bring to life. And we're even going to show you how to replace a sky using Lightroom to start off with, and then we're going to go into Photoshop. So we've got a fantastic stream for you. Let's go ahead and get started. All right, so good to see you. You guys are fantastic here in the chat, and I'm really excited to see everyone. Okay, great. So let's go ahead and pop over here to Lightroom. There we go. I'm just going to move me into the little corner here. All right, let's go ahead and just crop me in a little bit. There we go. Boop. Crop in the right, and I'm doing editing live on the fly to the broadcast. There we go. Pop it into the corner on the very left side of the image. So we're going to be starting with HDRs in Lightroom. So if you're not familiar with an HDR, basically HDR stands for high dynamic range. And let's go ahead and take a look at the photos we're going to be working on today. So we've got actually a few different examples. I want to show you HDRs from a few different photos, but this is our first set. So these are images that I photographed in Alaska last year. These, by the way, if you've never been to Alaska, I can't recommend it enough. It's one of the most beautiful places that I've ever been to. And everywhere I looked, I was just super glad that I had my camera with me, because like this, the scene that you guys are looking at right now is actually like a 10-minute drive right outside of Anchorage, Alaska. So everywhere you look is just absolutely beautiful. But for those of you who don't know what an HDR is or the purpose of an HDR, it stands for a high dynamic range image. And the whole deal of why we even would use an HDR or why we even need to use HDRs is because cameras have a relatively limited dynamic range. And what that means is their ability to capture detail in the highlights and in the shadows. So our eyes are fantastic. They can see detail in highlights and shadows really, really well. We have like 15 to 20 stops of dynamic range in our eyes, but most cameras are nowhere near that. And that's why if you take a picture, let's say you take a picture of your friend and there's a window behind them, maybe the window is just pure white, right? It's like blown out, as we call it in the photography world. It's just, you have no detail there, okay? Or maybe you're taking an image and the sky is properly exposed, but your foreground just goes all the way to black, like you don't have any detail in your foreground. So that is a limit of the dynamic range of your cameras. Now, higher end cameras do have higher dynamic ranges, but they're still relatively limited, and even the best cameras are nowhere near the dynamic range of our eyes. And that's why it's very difficult to capture a scene in, in a photograph that actually looks like you saw it in your eyes, because you're limited by the technology. So what some beautiful genius figured out is that if you take multiple different photos, each of them exposed differently, so you've got one that's exposed brighter, one you have a proper exposure, and one that's darker, you can actually combine all of those different photos together in post-production. And now you can do this natively within Lightroom. You don't even have to leave Lightroom. And you can combine all of the detail from the highlights, midtones, and shadows and put them all together to get an HDR. So that's the whole idea behind HDRs. Now, typically, you would want to have 3 different exposures. So you can see it here in Lightroom. Let's just go ahead and double click here. So you can see I've taken an image that's overexposed, one that's properly exposed. Here we go. Let's just make sure that we're good. Overexposed, properly exposed, and underexposed. All right. It's actually these 3. I highlighted the wrong one. There we go. All right. There we go. So we have properly exposed, underexposed, and overexposed. Now, when you're doing this, like when you're actually taking these photographs, it's a really good idea to have your camera on a tripod because you don't want to be moving around from shot to shot. You want to make sure that each of those different photos is basically in the exact same place, and that's going to make the software much easier to basically stitch everything together. All right. Danielle says, you lived in Alaska as a kid and it was awesome. Yeah, it's just, there's just so much nature everywhere you look. Beautiful tall mountains. We'll get to see some of these in these pictures. But yeah, it was one of those things where I was like, Alaska, yeah, that sounds pretty cool. When I got there, it just totally changed my perception of nature on a much larger scale than I had ever seen before. So absolutely love it, and I can't wait to go back. So how do we create an HDR in Lightroom? Well, it's actually really easy to do. So let's go ahead to grid view. I'm gonna hit G for grid view. We're just gonna click this plus button a couple times. And you see I've got a bunch of photos loaded up and very, very easy to do. So what you wanna do is select your images. Okay, you can see I've got my images selected here, properly exposed, underexposed, and overexposed. Next, what we're gonna do is right click there, and I'm gonna go to photo merge. Okay, and then we're gonna go to HDR. I just gotta make sure I actually select multiple photos. You can hold Control or Command to do that. So we're gonna right click and go to Photo Merge, and here you have HDR waiting for you. All right, so let's go ahead and click there. Now, it used to be that you'd have to bring these into Photoshop and run all kinds of, like relatively in-depth processes, but they pulled it all into Lightroom. And check this out. I'm just gonna make this a little bit larger so everyone can see here. What? It just does it for you. This is very exciting, especially for anyone who has tried to do HDRs in the past and had a little bit of, trouble with them. Lightroom has gotten so good at doing this that I just use all of the auto settings. And you can see here in our little preview, we have full detail in the highlights, midtones, and shadows. An image like this is basically impossible to get straight out of camera using, maybe if you used a super, super high-end camera and the lighting was just right. But with an HDR, we're able to pull all of these images together. Now, you do have some options here for auto align. I do recommend keeping that selected. Even if you are photographing everything on a tripod, it's good to have everything auto align. It's gonna take information from each of the exposures and make sure they're all in the same place, okay? Next, we have an option for the auto settings, and we can just turn this off and on, but I find auto just does a really great job. And we wanna keep in mind that what we're gonna get out of this is still completely editable. So if I wanna go in and change my highlights or shadows after the fact, I can do that incredibly easily. Now, you'll also see an option for de-ghost. De-ghosting, basically that happens if there's any movement from one photograph to another. Let's say you've got some trees and they're kind of blowing in the wind a little bit, they're dancing a little bit. So they're gonna be like in one place in a photo, and then the next photograph, they're gonna be in another place. So this de-ghosting amount, basically that's going to try to like correct that. It's going to try to erase one of the trees and fill it in. So if you don't have anything moving, it's good to do this none. But if you do have moving elements, you can go ahead and click on high there. Okay, fantastic. And let's go ahead and hit merge. And it's going to pull everything together and give us our final. Fantastic. And Dan says, I believe the software can line up handheld photos. And I think you're right. As long as you're pretty still with your hand holding, you still want to be like as close as possible. You don't want to be like, whoa, whoa, whoa. But yes, the software can definitely align things as well. All right. We've got a question from Senthil. Aaron, is it possible to do hair masking in Lightroom? There is range masking here in Lightroom, and you can do some hair masking, but I think, in my opinion, if you want to do like professional level hair masking, I would do that in Photoshop. So let's go ahead and take a look at all of our images now. I'm going to hold Shift and click on all of our images and hit N for our survey view. So here we can see our first image on the top left. This is our regular exposure. Then we have our underexposed image, and you can see the sky looks great, and we can see our overexposed image, and this is where we're getting detail from the ground, and this is what we wound up with. Okay, so it really took all of the best information from these different photos and combined them together. But check this out. I'm gonna hit D for the develop module, and you can see we are working still with a raw image. So I still have access to all of my information here, and I can make adjustments as I want. Now, you're gonna notice that a lot of these sliders are moved already because we have auto settings applied. So it's gonna boost up my shadow detail, it's gonna pull back information from my highlights, but let's say I wanted to add a little bit of clarity. Oh, beautiful. I can do that very easily just with these sliders, and this is my raw image. I'm gonna bring up our vibrance a little bit as well, okay? Then, if you want to, you could still, for instance, darken the sky. You could grab a graduated filter. We showed you how to do this in yesterday's broadcast. I'm gonna just click and drag down right there, and we're gonna just bring our exposure down a little bit, and I'm gonna bring our color temperature a little bit cooler, which is gonna make some blues in the sky. So now we just have like a beautiful, vibrant blue sky. I'm also gonna just zoom out a little bit. We're gonna go to 1/4 zoom so I can see how this looks with my image as a whole. There we go. Anytime I make adjustments like this, I wanna see how does this look like for my whole image. I wanna make sure that it's not just looking good for part of the image, and you can do that by zooming out. I think this is looking great. Maybe I'll just bring my exposure up just a tiny bit. And man, how cool is that? Alrighty, let's go ahead and get out of our graduated filter for now. I'm gonna go back to Fit View, and we're gonna just remove a couple dust spots here. So let's go ahead and zoom in. There we go. I'm gonna go to a 1:1 zoom, and we can see we have a couple of dust spots on our image. This is kind of, I don't know about totally unavoidable, but I've been photographing for 10 or 15 years now, and it seems like pretty much every camera that I get, every lens that I get, like there's always dust that winds up in your images. You can send your cameras off to a professional and have them clean. I wouldn't necessarily try to do this on your own, but yeah, just pretty much, this was a relatively new camera that I took these pictures with, and I pretty much always have dust on my images. Maybe it's just me, maybe I'm just like, don't take as good of care of my gear as I possibly could, but I always have dust. So it's really easy to remove that here in Lightroom. Basically, you just wanna get to the spot removal right here. There we go, you can hit Q, and then you wanna make your brush about the size of the dust, and just click on it. Boom. And Lightroom is so cool because it figures out the best area to sample from. So you can see it right there. It sampled from this area on the left and replaced this area on the right. Okay, we can do the same thing here. So let's go ahead and click there, and boom, we went ahead and removed that dust. So let's go ahead and click off of there. Oh, we have a couple more pieces of dust. So you can just open your tool again and click here on any dust. By the way, you can also hold down the space bar when you're zoomed in, and then click and drag. This is gonna allow you to navigate around your image. So spacebar, we're just kind of clicking and dragging here up, and you can see we've got some dust here as well. So let's go ahead and make our brush a little bit smaller. There we go. Just click right on the dust, and you can see Lightroom does a really, really great job removing it. So just kind of moving around here, making sure we got all of it. I think we did. All right, so we zoom out and we're good to go. So this is just one example of how big of an effect HDR can have. So let's just do this one more time because I really want to hammer it home, and we've got some beautiful examples here. This is Denali National Park. I was lucky enough to to visit Denali. So basically on like the last day that I was going to be in Alaska, I was like, I have to go to Denali National Park. I have to see this with my own eyes. So I rented a car at like 7 or 8 o'clock at night. And then at 10 at night, I drove the car from Anchorage to Denali, which is like a 5 or 6 hour drive. I got to Denali National Park at like 5 in the morning, woke up, basically I slept like 20 minutes in my car, on the side of the road, and woke up, drove into the park, and I was able to capture sunrise in Denali National Park. And this was on my last day in Alaska. And so I spent the day in Denali, and then at about 6 or 7 o'clock p.m., drove back to Anchorage, returned the car, and then the next morning at like 8 a.m. got on a flight with basically not sleeping at all the night before. But it was totally worth it because look at this. Beautiful, beautiful photographs of this amazing location. So this is another great example. Let's go ahead and hold Control or Command and click on all these. I'm going to hit N for survey view, and we can see that we have a properly exposed photo, underexposed, and overexposed. So we're going to be able to get detail from every single one of these when we merge them together. So let's just do the same thing again. We're going to right click here, and we're going to go to Photo Merge and over to HDR. There we go. So it's going to pull up our HDR preview. All right. And this is so cool that we don't even have to leave you don't even have to leave Lightroom to get these effects. All right, and that looks great. So let's go ahead and hit merge, and there we go. It's pretty much just does it for you. And we'll go ahead and open this image up when it clicks on there. So my personal strategy, there we go. Oh, let's just let this load because it's absolutely beautiful. It just takes me right back to that wonderful morning. It was such a great experience in my life. And boom, we're good to go. We'll just pop into our develop module really quick. Just grab our dust. There we go, our spot removal. You can also hit Q on your keyboard to remove a couple spots there. All right, those are kind of the main ones that I saw. We'll just remove our spots and we're good to go. So you can see we have detail in our highlights, midtones, and shadows. Absolutely incredible. So when it comes to like landscape photographs, basically anytime I've got a picture that I really, that I think is really gonna be special, I'll bracket my exposures. So I'll always take a exposure that's, you know, overexposed, properly exposed, and underexposed. Because, well, if you get home on your computer and you pull all these shots up and you're like, oh, the sky is overexposed, or I can't see any details in the ground, you know, you're not going to be able to get back there and take the exact same shot again. So when I'm doing any type of landscape or nature photography, I pretty much bracket every single shot that I take. It takes up a lot of space on your computer, but you can always just delete the shots that don't wind up working if you want to save some space. So yeah, that's my general advice is whenever you're in a scene like this, especially if you want to capture detail in the sky as well as in the foreground, just exposure bracket, and it's going to help you out. So now we can move on to the next topic in Lightroom. Let's go ahead and full screen me out here. Boom. So the next topic in Lightroom is using a single photograph to create HDRs in Lightroom. And literally this morning when I was putting all this stuff together, I was like, I wonder if it's possible to do that in Lightroom, because I have done it in Photoshop. There's a really cool technique that I've used in Photoshop called luminosity masking, where basically you can take one single photo, break it out into multiple different exposures, and then combine that back together. So this morning I was like, I wonder if I can do this in Lightroom, and it turns out you can. So if you have a photograph where part of your image is slightly overexposed or underexposed, you can actually take a single photograph, break that out into multiple different copies, and then merge that back together as an HDR in Lightroom. So I'm very, very excited about this because I had no idea you could do it until this morning, and it just really, really opens up a lot of possibilities. So let's go ahead and show you how to do that. All right, so we're gonna just move on to some images here that I took in Tucson, Arizona last year. I took a road trip to Tucson, Arizona. And by the way, if you haven't been, there's these stunning saguaro cactuses. Look at this. This is in Saguaro National Park. I'm sure we've all seen the saguaro cactuses. They're so cool and they're really big too. And here in Saguaro National Park, I mean, there's just thousands of them. They're basically just like trees that dot the entire landscape of the Saguaro National Park. So I was driving through Saguaro. You can see it's basically sunset here, and got pretty lucky with this shot. Let's just go to the next shot in my list here. Got pretty lucky with this shot. Basically, I pulled on the side of the road. This was like right after sunset, and there was one more car in the park, and I I went through the sunroof in my car. It's a little camera hack that I love to do. I love to set my tripod up in the sunroof and then take photographs from the sunroof of the car, which is, I know it's a little bit like cheating, but it's a lot of fun. So I got this exposure and everything looks really, really good. However, you can see in the foreground, all of this information is just really dark. Like we've kind of lost all of the information. And this is, again, just due to the dynamic range of the camera. It's not gonna be able to capture detail in the highlights and the shadows. However, it might not look like it, but there actually is some detail here in our image. So I'm gonna show you guys how to actually get this detail out. And the camera that I was using, let's go ahead and hit I for information here. Let's see if it says the camera that I was using there. Camera, what camera was I using? I was using a Sony. Yeah, this is the Sony A7R III was the camera that I was using here. Oh, and I gotta share my screen. I keep forgetting to do that. Oh my gosh. Someone says, can you share your camera? I keep forgetting to do that. Maybe I just shouldn't pop into the full screen view anymore. Okay, let's just go back. I am so sorry, everyone. Okay. So here we have, this is Saguaro National Park, absolutely stunning. And this is the photo that I took after dark. So we have some light trails here that, this is just a car kind of passing by. And I wanna see if I can get the detail in the highlights of my image as well as the shadows of the image. So this is where I'm gonna pull everything together to create my HDR. And we're gonna do this from one single frame. All right, let's show you how to do it. So let's hit G to get back to our grid view. Now we're gonna click on our image. We're going to right click here and we're gonna go down to create a virtual copy. So virtual copies are incredibly powerful. Yesterday we showed you how to create virtual copies and how to use those when creating Lightroom presets. Now what we're gonna do is create a virtual copy and then use that as an HDR. So let's go ahead and click on create virtual copy. All right, we're gonna go to our develop module. Fantastic, and we're gonna just bring our exposure up. So let's crank our exposure way up here. There we go. And you can see when I crank my exposure way up, well, all of a sudden we don't have any detail in our highlights anymore, like our sky is totally blown out, but I do see some detail here in my shadows. So you can see we've got some saguaro here, we've got all type of different cactus. Really, really cool shot. So definitely Dan says, the key for using a single image is using a raw file. Definitely, this would be very difficult to do with a JPEG. You would probably not be able to get as much detail. So because we have our raw file, I'm able to get detail in my highlights and shadows. So let's go ahead and take a look at both of these photographs here. Here's my original photograph, and then the image on the right is where we brought our exposure up a little bit. And now I want to merge these back together again to see if I can get detail in the highlights as well as the shadows. So let's see if we can do it. All right, let's go back to our grid view. I'm gonna hold Control or Command and click on both of my images. We're gonna right click and go down to Photo Merge and over to HDR. So very same process as we did before when we had 3 different images. And check this out. We now have detail in our highlights and in our shadows. It basically treats these like 2 different images and then runs the same program to create a copy of those images. So let's go ahead and hit merge. It's gonna merge them back together again with detail in our highlights, midtones, and shadows. And like, honestly, this is a mind-blowing technique. I had no idea that you could do this in Lightroom from a single photo. So let's go ahead and double click on this and see what we were able to get. So this is our original image, okay? You can see not much detail in the foreground. Next, we have our overexposed image, and here it's combined the 2 together, and look at this. We've got sky detail, we've got detail on the road, nothing is overexposed, nothing is too far underexposed. I've got all of the original detail from my photograph from a single image. This is just really, really exciting for me. Cameras have come a long way since I started photography. Digital cameras have. And to be able to do this from a single exposure is really, really special. So what we can do now, we can continue to edit this. So I'm going to bring up my exposure just a little bit. Fantastic. And if I want to go ahead and add a little bit more detail to the foreground, I can then bring in my adjustment brush. So let's go ahead and grab our adjustment brush. Now, by default, my adjustment brush's default settings to +1 exposure. So I'm going to go ahead and paint here in my foreground. There we go, to bring our exposure up. There we go, because I wanted a little bit more detail here in all the plants. Okay, now that looks okay. The thing is, when I brought up my exposure, you can see it affected the plants, but it also affected the background as well. And that's because it's not necessarily targeting either highlights or shadows. It's just making everything brighter. So now let's go ahead and bring our exposure back down to 0. And I'm just going to bring my shadows up a little bit. And this is just, again, this is just the areas that I actually painted. I'm able to bring the shadow detail up a little bit. And I'm going to make this a tiny bit warmer as well. There we go. And look at that. So we've gone from a single photo, there we go, from this photo, just one picture, to here, and now we have all this detail in our highlights, midtones, and shadows. So I think you can see why I'm so excited about this, because it really opens up the possibilities. Sometimes taking multiple exposures, either you forgot to do it or just wasn't the right opportunity for it, but you can merge multiple photo, or the single photo. You can take a single photo, split it out into multiple photos, and then bring that back together again. All right, let's show you one more example, because I think this is such a valuable technique. So this photo here, I really love. We've got a moon here looking good. The sky is brilliant. We've got some highlights here. I like this foreground elements kind of framing our photograph here. But the area here in the foreground is a little bit too dark. So what we're going to do, let's go back to our grid view, G for grid view. We're going to right click, and I'm going to go again to create a virtual copy. There we go. And now in this virtual copy, let's go to our develop module, and we're just going to bring our exposure up until I can see all the detail that I need here in my foreground. Okay, you can see my sky is a little bit too bright now, but we have all this detail in the foreground. So now we're going to combine these together again. Let's hold Control or Command and click on both of them. We're going to right click and go down to Photo Merge and over to HDR. There we go. This is such a cool technique. So Dan is saying, wow, looks fantastic. Susan's saying, looks fab. I couldn't agree more. I'm just absolutely blown away by Lightroom. It's so, so cool. So let's go ahead and hit merge, and you can see now we have detail in our highlights as well as our shadows. Let's merge those back together again from a single photograph. There we go. And you can see it just takes a second for Lightroom to figure everything out. There we are. Fantastic. And basically it's just going to pop out our HDR image. I'm going to just hit the number 6 on there to make it red so it kind of stands out from the rest of the images. And let's go ahead and take a look. So here is our original image up here on the top left. Here is the image that we just brought the exposure up. And then on the bottom, we have our HDR that's merged from a single photograph that, well, we basically broke into 2. So let's hit D for the develop module. And then don't forget, you can definitely go in here and now change your highlight and shadows as well. So I have so much information to work with now that I'm able to get a beautiful, beautiful exposure from a single image. Let's just go ahead and bring our vibrance up. You don't want to go too high. It's going to start to look a little bit fake, but a little bit more vibrance I think is looking really, really good. All right, well, there we have it, everyone. Bringing together multiple different exposures from one single image. So if you've ever taken an image where you have something high overexposed or underexposed, this is really going to work pretty well. Now, I will say it's a little bit more limited than actual exposure bracketing because you're still limited to the amount of information that's available in one photograph. So if you do have a scene that has a very large dynamic range, like if the highlights are very, very bright and the shadows are very, very dark, then it still is a good idea to bracket, take an overexposed, properly exposed, and underexposed image. But in a pinch, this most definitely works. And as long as the dynamic range of your photograph isn't too far into the highlights and the shadows, you should be good to go to use this technique. So it's kind of blowing my mind right now, and I hope you guys are enjoying this as well. All right, well, we are just moving right along. Next, we're gonna move into range masking. All right, I'm gonna just go full screen on this. I'm gonna remember to get back to our screen recording. So the next thing I wanna show you is range masking in Lightroom. And this is one of the more recent features added to Lightroom Classic, and I think it's one of the most powerful features of Lightroom. Basically, if you've ever used Photoshop, there's a tool called Blend If in Photoshop, and range masking is basically the same thing, but in Lightroom. So this is going to allow us to only affect areas like our highlights or just our midtones or just our shadows. And we have sliders that we can just pull that in. So this is really gonna help out, especially if you have images with maybe your sky is a little bit too bright or maybe your foreground's a little bit too dark. You can actually highlight those light ranges using the range masking and then make some corrections there. So we've got a really great image of the Golden Gate Bridge that we're going to be range masking. So let's go ahead here and pop over to the full screen now. So we've got our San Francisco images here. Let's go ahead and hit G for our grid view. All right, and here is our image of the Golden Gate Bridge. So we're gonna be taking this and pulling it together with range masking. So let's go ahead and double click here. There we go, and you can see really beautiful photograph. I had the opportunity to photograph the Golden Gate Bridge at sunrise, and there was just awesome fog. I mean, what an iconic landscape. So, so cool. Again, another example of getting up before sunrise and getting to the location and spending sunrise on the hill. I had a fantastic time when I was in San Francisco last year, and not very surprisingly, but kind of surprisingly, there were a lot of other photographers out there taking the same photograph this morning. So it was like I was here and there had to be like 10 to 15 other people that were up here at dawn photographing the Golden Gate Bridge. So we all got to hang out and I made some good friends there as well. So just another really fun part about photography, especially when you go to these locations. I wind up meeting people that, you know, then become my lifelong friends, which is absolutely fantastic. So let's go ahead and show you how to use range masking, because again, this is just an example where our highlights are just way too bright here in this image. So what we're gonna do is grab our develop module. So let's go to our develop module and I'm gonna go to my graduated filter. So our graduated filter here, we're just gonna click and drag down in this direction. And for this, I wanna zoom out. So we're gonna go to 1/4 zoom so I can see my image as a whole. There we go. Let's just bring this right here. Looks pretty good. Now, I'm gonna actually bring my exposure down because it's way, way, way too bright. Our exposure down, and we're gonna bring our highlights down as well. All right, and let's just bring this right down there. And you know what? We're just gonna make the sky a little bit more blue also. Okay, so using a graduated filter, you can see we were able to make the sky a little bit darker in the top left of our image. So here's when we imported it, you can see really not much detail at all in that sunrise. And then here in the after, we can see a lot more detail. The only problem is, let's go ahead and zoom in. I'm gonna just go to a 1-to-1 zoom. Whoops, there we go. Let's just undo that. The only problem is, basically I just took a graduated filter from the top down and made everything darker. So not only did it make my sky darker, but it made my bridge a lot darker. So you can see, here's the original photograph. The bridge looks nice, brilliant colors. You can see the red of the Golden Gate Bridge. And in the after, it kind of just looks black up here, right? Because it made the bridge darker as well as the background. So this is where range masking comes in, because I can tell this graduated filter, hey, I don't need to be visible in the shadows. Let's just make this visible in the highlights, and then it's only gonna be visible in the sky, basically. So let's go back to our fit view and we'll show you how to do it. So here we have our graduated filter, making everything darker. Now, in our graduated filter panel, here on the very right-hand side, so our graduated filter panel, if I scroll down all the way to the bottom, we're gonna see where it says range mask. And right now it's set to off, so it's gonna affect our highlights and shadows equally. Let's go ahead and turn this to luminance, okay? So this is going to basically affect the light and darks, and you can do this by color as well. Let's go ahead and select luminance, and now I have a couple of sliders. I have my range slider and I have a smoothness slider. So let's show you how to do this. Now John asks, would an HDR work here as well? Yes. So let's go ahead, we'll try that after this one, and then we can kind of compare the two. Now I didn't actually exposure bracket this shot. I was just, to be totally honest, I was just like kind of blown away by the sunrise on the Golden Gate Bridge. So my camera settings weren't necessarily optimal. And I was just like so caught up and like just trying to like get a photo. So I didn't exposure bracket these, but we'll try it with a single photograph. All right. So here we're gonna go ahead and take our range, and I'm just gonna click from the left and then drag this to the right. And what this is gonna do is it's gonna make this effect invisible in the shadows. There we go. So you can see it's disappearing from my shadows, but it's still visible in my highlights. Now, if I click on this show luminance mask, there we go. Now we can actually see, okay, so you can see here it's affecting everything. And as I bring this from left to the right, now we can actually see with this red area what it's going on. All right, John says it's the San Francisco effect. I know, I was just like starry-eyed. I was like, oh, I can't believe I'm here for sunrise. I totally forgot to bracket any of my photographs. I was like looking around at all the other photographers like, what are you guys doing? Oh, I'm so intimidated. Just goes to show you can take pictures all your life and still be totally intimidated by your subject here. In this case is sunrise. So we can see here our range as I pull this in from the left to the right. It's basically just making this disappear from the shadows. Now, if I go the other way around, I'm going to click from the right to the left, it's going to disappear from the highlights. So you can use a few of these tools together. So if you want to affect your highlights and shadows separately, it's very easy to do with range masking. Now, we're going to go ahead and bring up the range from the left. There we go, looking great. And I'm going to bring up my smoothness as well. And this is just kind of going to smooth the effect out. So we have an option here is how smooth or rough we'd like this effect to be. Now we're gonna go ahead and turn off this luminance mask. I just wanted to show you how it worked, but we wanna do all of our adjustments here like with these actual tools on. So let's go ahead, I'm just gonna bring my smoothness down and bring our range up just a little bit. There we go. All right, and we can see this is starting to look really, really good. So let's go to our original. I'm just gonna turn off my graduated filter here. So back into our original, this is how the image looks straight out of camera. You can see basically pretty much no difference in the sky, or sorry, no detail in the sky. And here in the afterwards, we've got a lot of detail in the sky. So it's a really, really big difference. So let's go ahead and take a look at this because I think range masking is incredibly powerful. And because this morning, I realized you could do HDRs from a single photograph, let's go ahead and do that. So I'm gonna right click here on this image. We're gonna go down to create a virtual copy, okay? Now, in this virtual copy, let's go to D for the develop module. I'm gonna go back to my graduated filter here, okay? Because we still have the option to edit this. Even though it's a virtual copy, I can add or remove filters like the radial filter or the graduated filter. So let's just click on that and hit the delete key. You can see it just gets rid of my graduated filter. So now I'm gonna go back to G for the grid view, and we're gonna create another virtual copy. So this is gonna allow us to compare and contrast using the HDR technique from a single photo versus using a graduated filter with range masking. So we're gonna right click here and we're gonna go to create another virtual copy. There we go. And let's go to develop module now. And I'm just gonna bring my exposure down. All right, let's bring it down. And you can see basically at this point, you get an idea. Let's just zoom into the sunrise. So even though I brought my exposure way down, there is a point at which I just don't have any detail in my photograph. And if I did exposure bracket, I would have detail here in the sun. But as I bring it down, you can see these highlights just kind of turn gray. So that is why you want to exposure bracket, because basically this is, I don't have any detail there. So I'm gonna bring it down about as far as I can. It's 2.5 stops until I don't see any of that gray. Okay, so now we're gonna go back to grid view. So we have our original, there's our before and our after. So let's hold Control or Command. We're gonna click on the two. We're gonna right click and go to photo merge and then down to HDR. All right, let's just grab a drink of water here. Oh, that is stunning. Absolutely beautiful. Okay, so let's go ahead and merge these two together, and then we can kind of compare and contrast the HDR technique with the graduated filter and the range mask. All right, now keep in mind, no matter what the winner is, both of these tools definitely have their place in Lightroom. So let's see, it's just popping out this HDR. There we go. And let's hold Control or Command and click on the two and hit N for survey view. All right, now I'm gonna hit Shift Tab, which is gonna get rid of our sidebars really quick. And here we have our image on the left. This is using a graduated filter with a range mask. And this image on the right is two different photos, or sorry, it's two different copies of the same photo that we used the merge to HDR. And you can see the photo on the left, basically I only paid attention to the sky. The photo on the right-hand side, because we applied those HDR settings, it also lightened up the foreground. And you know what? I really like this photograph on the right. I don't have as much sky detail as I do on the left photograph, but I really like just overall what we're getting with the image on the right. So let me know in the chat which one you guys prefer. And we're gonna take this to the next level. So not only did we, do the HDR method on the image on the right, but after that, we can still apply a graduated filter and still use range masking, okay? So we have even more editing that we can actually do. So let's go to this image on the right. I'm gonna hit D for the develop module. There we go. So this is my HDR image. So you can see right up here at the very top, this is our HDR, and I can apply a graduated filter and still use a range masking. All right. So we have a couple different, some folks are saying they like the image on the left, some folks are saying they like the image on the right. So what we're gonna do is take this graduated filter now and bring this from the top down. And now I'm actually gonna apply this graduated filter with range masking on our HDR. So just a reminder that these techniques are not mutually exclusive. You can use them in combination with each other in many different ways. And Michelle asks, Michelle says she likes the one on the right. Dan asks, can you HDR both of those? And that is a really interesting question. Let's try it after this. So here we go. Let's go ahead and take our exposure down a little bit darker. There we go. I'm gonna make this a little bit cooler as well. I think we're gonna get a winner out of this. I really do. So we're gonna bring this down, and then we're gonna put range masking on luminance, okay? And then make this not visible in the shadows, so just visible in the highlights. There we go. All right, now I wanna do one more range mask. I'm gonna grab my my adjustment brush, and we're gonna paint right over top of this, this tower on the Golden Gate Bridge, okay? Now, as you can see, it's bringing our exposure up a little bit, okay? I'm gonna go ahead and try to bring my saturation up a little bit too. There we go. We can change these settings at any time, by the way. And let's go ahead and range mask this one over to luminance. And I want this one to not show up in the highlights. So I'm gonna go from the right side to the left. There we go. And now we can see this is only showing up in the shadows. So let's go ahead and bring our saturation up there. It's a Golden Gate Bridge after all, right? We want it to be bright red, right? We want to be able to see that red. Okay, let's bring up our contrast a little bit. Man, this is looking really cool. So we're basically range masking after we created our HDR, and I'm painting this in the clouds or the fog a little bit too, because I think it's just a really nice effect. And let's go ahead and just work on our exposure a little bit. There we go. And I think this is looking really, really good. So let's go ahead and click that off. So we can see I was able to use range masking. Let's just go back to our fit view. We were able to use range masking on the sky as well as the tower on the image that we made in HDR. And this is from a single photograph. Can you believe that? Wow. Oh yeah, Malik says, who's the 12-year-old screaming here? Yeah, I live in Chicago. I live in the city, so we've got neighbors right on the other side of our wall, and they're having a fun time over there. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look now, because I want to just see our before and after. So let's hold Control or Command and click on both of these images here. All right, we're just going to remove that one. So this is what we have. The image on our left is what we started with. This is straight out of camera. And then here's our image on the right, where we merged everything together as an HDR, brought in our graduated filter with range masking, and we brought in another adjustment brush and range masked out this south tower. I think we've got a winner on our hands. Now, looking at this, I do think the blue in the sky is maybe just a little bit too dark, and I want to remove some of those dust spots. So let's hit D for the develop module once more. This is the great thing about Lightroom. It's totally non-destructive. You can change any of these settings at any point in time. So let's go back to our graduated filter here. We're gonna hover over, there we go. And instead of bringing our exposure way down, this is like down 2.25 stops. We're just gonna go a little bit less on that. There we go. And our adjustment brush, there we go. This one here, let's go ahead and click on that. We're just gonna bring some of these settings back a little bit more subtle as well. So let's just do a 0.3 on this. You can type in any of these values if you want to as well. All right, and there we go. All right, let's hit G for the grid view again, and then we can compare the two again. Man, I think this is so cool. I'm just gonna process all my photos like this from now on, making a duplicate of a single image, merging them back to HDR, and then using graduated radial and adjustment brushes, using range masking, to go from this image on the left to this image on the right without exposure bracketing. I think this is just incredibly cool. And it shows you the potential of your photograph. So Lightroom basically allows you to unlock a lot of that potential that's in your photos. A lot of the time, I'll look at a photo and think like, oh, this is okay, but I'm missing information in the highlights or the shadows. But only when I get it into post-processing and I really spend some time and try to pull out all that information, that's when I see that there's so much more information available to me in this photograph than I ever thought was possible. All right, I love it. Let's hit D for the develop module. We're just gonna remove a couple spots here. All right, Michael says, looks amazing. Janet as well, I gotta agree. It actually came out even better than I thought it was going to. And I really appreciate you guys helping me out with the idea to merge those as an HDR and then apply the graduated filter. So cool. So cool. I'm loving this. Now, this other tower is a little bit tilty here. There are some tools in Lightroom that we can use to kind of straighten that up again. All right, let's go ahead and bring that back around and see if we can straighten out this. Oh. All right. Bear with me. I'm trying to zoom in and out and my computer's thinking about it. Okay, so I want to see if I can straighten out this tower here on the right. So let's go back to our develop module. There we are. Fantastic. So back to our develop module. And we're gonna go down here, just scroll in your right-hand side. This is where you make all of your settings here, okay? We're gonna go down to transform, and here we have an upright command. I'm gonna just click on auto. And this is gonna basically try to figure out all of the horizontal and vertical lines in my image and try to figure everything out. Let's click on vertical and see how this does. It's just gonna take a second. It worked. So now you can see my tower here is vertical and this tower is vertical. The only problem is it's totally warped our image, which is not a big deal. If you really wanted this, you could totally just crop it in. But I think we were wanting something a little bit more subtle. So let's go back to auto here and see what that's going to give. And then you can still adjust your vertical tilt as well. So if we want to just bring it back a little bit, there we go. And we'll bring our horizontal in a little bit as well. All right, so here you can see I'm able to straighten out the towers. If you do wind up doing this, notice that you've got a little bit of area of your photo that doesn't have any information on the top left. So there's actually some cool things that you can do. Historically, what I would have done would just be to crop this. I just crop this out, but Photoshop actually has some really great content-aware fill tools that I could just fill this sky in. Okay, there we go. Let's just make sure we bring this, I think it was a little bit farther off from where I wanted. There we go, that's looking really good. So if you get something like this and you're like, okay, looking pretty good, but I do have this area I need to fill in. Okay, you can hit G for your grid view. There we go. Let's go ahead and just right click on this image. There, and I'm going to go to edit in, and I'm going to go down to edit as in Photoshop 2020. Okay, as of now, I don't believe you can do any content-aware fill in Lightroom, but who knows? Maybe they'll bring that to Lightroom, which would be super fun. There we go. All right, so basically it's just pulling this image right into Photoshop. Really, really seamless workflow. There we go. And we're gonna hit F for full screen. So let's go ahead and create a new layer here. All right, and on my new layer, I'm gonna use my lasso tool. So L for the lasso tool, and we're just gonna make a selection right around this area. I'm gonna use the polygonal lasso tool. So let's just make a selection right around this area, a little bit bigger than what we need. Okay, and we're gonna go to edit, and then down to content aware fill. Okay, content aware fill, because again, we just don't have any information there on the left side of our image. So this is gonna tell us where it's going to sample from. All right, and here we have a preview of our final output here on the right-hand side. So I'll say, yeah, let's go for it. Auto sample all layers, everything looks good. So let's go ahead and hit OK. And this is on a new layer. And now we can deselect and look at that. We were just able to fill this area in using a completely automatic tool. Content aware fill in Photoshop really is fantastic, especially if you have sky detail. I mean, if you wanted to like content aware fill like a person's face, that'd be a little bit harder for the software to figure everything out. But for like sky detail and things like this, content aware fill does a really great job. So you can see I was able to do pretty much most of my adjusting in Lightroom, and then a little area needed filling, and I was able to do that in Photoshop. So let's go ahead and just save this out. Control or Command S to save this out. You're gonna see it's saving here, and then we can just bring this right back into Photoshop. Cody says, wow, that is amazing, and I completely agree, right? It's just like, okay, select that area, content aware fill, boom, good to go. And I really like this photograph. I think we really did a great job transforming it. So let's go ahead and just quit Photoshop now. I'm gonna hit Control or Command Q to quit this out, and check this out. Because we went from Lightroom into Photoshop, it's already here in Lightroom again, okay? The final version that has the corner, so you can see here's the version that's missing information, and here is my edit with that information applied. So there's the before and the after. Now that information is back. We content aware filled it. It looks fantastic, and we are good to go. I don't even have to try to figure out my file storage or anything like that. It just does it automatically for me, which is so, so cool. All right, I hope you guys are enjoying this. I think these tools are really cool. Range masking combined with these manual HDRs is just so, so cool. All right, Matt says, oh dear, I have about 10,000 blowed out photos to reprocess using HDR. I know, right? It's like the possibilities just open up tremendously when we do these sort of effects. Okay, we're looking really, really good. So we're gonna move on. We're gonna change subjects here a little bit. We're gonna show you how to remove some objects from photographs in your images. So let's go back to our grid view. Here we've got some images from my good friend, Pierre Lambert. We're just gonna link him up here in the chat window. Let's go ahead and just link him up. There he is on Instagram, and he has a YouTube channel as well. So make sure to check out Pierre. All of these images are from Pierre, and we're gonna take this image here on the bottom and start removing some objects. But before we do, we're going to, let's go ahead and double click this. Before we start removing these people, because we just have some like, some people in the foreground that don't necessarily need to be there. Before we remove those, let's see what kind of information we can get out of this image. So let's start with our HDR processing, since that seems to be a hit. So we're gonna just right click here. We're going to go to create a virtual copy. There we go. And let's hit D for our develop module. And here we're gonna just bring our exposure up. So I wanna get a lot more information in my image. Okay, everything I can possibly get out of this image. Fantastic. So let's go back to G for our grid view and hold Control or Command and click on both of them. And we're going to right click and go to Photo Merge and go to HDR. All right, and here we can see this is looking really great. Let's go ahead and click on Merge. Now, Sam asks a question in the chat. Aaron, when I work on colors in Lightroom and then edit in Photoshop, the color changes. Why is this? That's a great question. The reason why that could be is your color settings. So let's go in Lightroom real quick before we move on with this photo. I'm gonna go to my preferences and I'm gonna go to external editing. Okay, so here in external editing, you can choose the file format that you'd like to edit in Photoshop. So your file format, you can choose between TIFF or PSD. Your color space, this is where you want to make sure that your color space is the same as the color space you're using in Photoshop. So color space here is set to Adobe RGB 1998, and bit depth is set to 16 bits per component. And I do recommend these settings. Now, as far as your file format goes, you can use TIFF or PSD. Both of those will work well, but I do recommend using Adobe RGB 1998, and I do recommend using 16-bit editing in Lightroom. Okay, so now that we've seen our settings in Lightroom, let's go ahead and open up Photoshop real quick. And we can see what our settings look like in Photoshop, because basically we want those to match. So here in Photoshop, let's go to, I'm just gonna create a new document, Control or Command N to do that. All right, and we're gonna go to Edit and then down to Color Settings. There we go. So color settings, and then here, our working space, I wanna set this, I'm gonna go to Adobe RGB 1998. So this is now gonna match everything that we're gonna be exporting out from Lightroom. So Lightroom and Photoshop are now using the same color space. Let's go ahead and hit OK. And you should be good to go from Lightroom to Photoshop. Let's go ahead and quit that out. We're good to go. So now when we import photos, they have the same color space and you shouldn't notice a big color shift. So hopefully that solves your problem. All right, great questions, everyone. So let's go ahead and just double click on, well, let's take a look at our images here. So this is our image straight out of camera on the left. On the middle, this is where we bumped our exposure up. There we go. And on the right-hand side, this is where we have basically everything is pulled together again. So let's go ahead and start working on this image now. I'm gonna hit D for our default module, for our develop module, and we're gonna edit this a little bit more. Now, I do have some things I'd like to remove from this photo that I just find a little bit distracting, like the hotel in the background and this area on the top left and things like that. Also, I'm gonna crop this photo, so let's hit R for the crop tool, and we're just gonna crop this in so the pagoda in the center really is centered. And let's just go ahead and straighten this, and you can do this with the crop tool as well. There we go. Now, back in my develop module, we're gonna bring our vibrance up a little bit. There we go. Really get some of those nice reds. Yeah, this red lighting is so beautiful. Getting some of those nice reds visible, and I think we're looking really great. I'm gonna grab our graduated filter. We're gonna go from the bottom up. There we are. And I'm gonna go ahead and bring our exposure down. So that's gonna just pull a little bit less focus here on my foreground, and we're gonna focus a little bit more on my background. And here we're gonna grab our adjustment brush. There we go. And I'm just gonna paint over top of the pagoda here. I think that's what this is called. We're gonna use range masking. So let's go ahead and range mask by luminance. So I don't want this to be visible in the darker areas, just the lighter areas. Okay. And then we can start working maybe our exposure a little bit. We're gonna bring up our saturation just a little bit as well, and our clarity. So I can do all of this and have it only affect the areas that I want. All right, that's looking really good. Let's go ahead and select off with that tool. And I'm gonna bring our color temperature a little bit cooler because I wanna introduce some blues to complement the reds in my image. All right, this is looking really great. So the next thing I wanna do is remove these people in the foreground and remove this pagoda right here. Now, you can most definitely do this just in Lightroom using things like the spot removal tool, but for more complicated object removal, I personally suggest using Photoshop. So let's right click here and go to Edit In, and I'm gonna go to Photoshop 2020. I'm just gonna grab my Wacom tablet real quick. There we go. So I'm gonna use a pressure sensitive tablet for this. It's not a necessary step. I just prefer to use a pressure sensitive tablet whenever I'm working in Photoshop. So let's go ahead and hit F for full screen. Now we're gonna create a new layer, and just like we did earlier, we're gonna just select out this pagoda on the left because I just think it's distracting a little bit here from the central one. So I'm just gonna make a selection right around the area I want to be removed. And because it's on a relatively simple background, the sky is relatively simple here, this tool should do a good job. So let's go to Edit, and then we're gonna go down to Content Aware Fill. So Content Aware Fill, and it's gonna know, hey, this is what we wanna get rid of. Let's just hit OK there. There we go. Takes a second to think about what it's doing, and check that out. Boom, just like that, that area on the left is completely gone. How cool is that, right? So there's the before and the after, and you can see my composition is cleaned up quite a bit. Great. Sunil asks, what tablet am I using? This is the Wacom Intuos Pro small tablet. I prefer the small size because the size of your tablet basically correlates to the size of your screen. And if you have a large tablet, you have to move your hand quite a bit to move across the tablet, but a smaller tablet means you have to move your hand less. So this is the least expensive version, the small, and it's the one that I prefer. Even if they all cost the same amount of money, I would get the smallest one because this is the one that I want. So just a little heads up there. Everyone has their own preferences, but this is the one that I would prefer. Okay, so we've removed that object on the left-hand side, and it looks pretty good. Let's see if we can remove this hotel using Content Aware Fill as well. So again, just grabbing my lasso tool, and there we go. Now, no guarantees that this tool works because it is just trying to do it automatically, but if it doesn't work exactly like you want, you can always go back and update it. There we go. Let's go to Edit and then down to Content Aware Fill. There we go. It's going to try to figure out the areas from that, everything around it. Let's hit OK there. And we can see here it worked okay. You know, it did remove that area, but we do have a little bit of like kind of ghosting there. And Sam asks, is there a drive for Wacom? Yeah, basically you just go to wacom.com and download all the drivers for whatever tablet that you're using. So just go into like the downloads or support section, and then there's a tablet utility that you download. It'll find out whatever tablet you're using and then update the drivers for whatever tablet you're using. Great question. So now what I want to do is I'm going to clone stamp. There we go. I'm going to clone stamp to kind of clean this up. So S for the clone stamp tool, then I'm going to hold Alt or Option. There we go. And we're just going to kind of clean this up a little bit. I'm on a new layer here. There we go, because it was just a little bit messy, in my opinion, just a little bit too much. So I'm just choosing a very large brush and clone stamping from one area to another. There we go. And we're able to remove this area completely as well. All right, we can see this is looking really, really good. Now I'm gonna just grab my brush tool and I'm gonna paint at a relatively low flow. All right, and then we're just gonna kind of fade these light streaks out a little bit. That's gonna help everything kind of blend back together again, and it's gonna look good. Now, let's just change this blend mode from normal to lighten. All right, and there we go. We can see we're starting to look really, really good. So I do think that the light pole here is just a little bit distracting in general. However, if we remove it completely, let's just take a new layer and S for the clone stamp tool. If I remove this light pole completely, it might look a little bit weird because all of a sudden, let's just sample from over here. All of a sudden, you're gonna be like, where is that light coming from? I might be able to remove everything. Yeah, I might be able to remove the top part of the light pole and just keep the bottom. That could be a good little workaround there. All right, and I'm just using the clone stamp to do this. I'm just sampling areas from around my image and painting them in there. Yeah, I think this will actually work as long as you have a visible light source. That's the thing about light sources is like, if you have lights in your image, like you can see that the ground here is actually lit up. You just want to make sure that you can identify that light source in the final. I'm going to just take some of this image on the left-hand side. We're going to right-click and I'm going to flip this horizontally. There we go. And we're just going to fill this here on the right-hand side. Pretty cool. Now I'm just going to make this a little bit brighter using a curves adjustment layer. So let's just grab our adjustment layer. We're going to go to curves and I'm going to clip this so it's only visible where that little patch of sky is visible. There we go. And then we can actually use blend if, just like we used range masking here, to say don't be visible in the highlights, just be visible in the shadow areas. All right. That wasn't working so well. We'll just put a layer. We'll just put a there we go. We'll just put a layer mask on there. All right. And Sam asks, can we do dodging and burning in Photoshop? Yes, definitely. Photoshop is really great for dodging and burning. Basically, dodging and burning is just painting some areas lighter and some areas darker in your image to draw attention to certain areas of your photographs. Okay, looking good. So let's go ahead and group all these together. Now I'm going to create a new layer and we're just going to grab our spot healing brush tool. There we go. Spot healing brush tool. And we're just going to start painting over these subjects. So if you want to do like large scale object removal, I do suggest doing that in Photoshop. I just think it's the tools are a little bit more specialized. You can definitely do, like as we showed you earlier, you can do things like spot removal in Lightroom and it works really well. But when removing like complicated objects like this or many different objects, I would recommend using Photoshop. There we go. And we'll just clone stamp on top of that and kind of fade that out there. So you can see I was able to get rid of guy number 1. He is gone. Thank you, guy number 1. All right. There we go. Let's go back to our spot healing brush tool. And we're going to just paint over our second subject here. And of course, the amount of time you spend on this is going to determine what your end result looks like. So I'm going relatively quick just because I want to show you guys a lot of other things in today's broadcast. But you could definitely spend a little bit more time and get fine-tuned results. All right. Thanks, Cody, for linking up my YouTube. I really appreciate it. Yeah, we have free tutorials on dodging and burning, on just about anything that you'd ever want to learn in Photoshop, as well as Lightroom. Check out Phlearn.com. All right. If you want to learn advanced photo editing, Phlearn.com is totally the way to go because we have really amazing advanced tutorials, and they're all available as a part of a subscription. So it just makes it really easy because you get instant access to everything. And then we also have free tutorials on YouTube for anyone who would like to view those. There we go. So I'm just clone stamping from the left to the right here to get rid of these. All right, looking great. There we go. And again, this is going to get a little bit more complicated around the areas like the stairs and things like that. Totally doable. You can still totally remove people even when the backgrounds are a little bit more complicated. It's just going to take a little bit more time. There we go. Fantastic. All right. Yep. And as Cody mentioned, in about 15 minutes here, we're going to go over our daily creative challenge. So if you haven't submitted to the daily creative challenge, please go ahead and do so. Kathleen showed us how to do monogramming today and created some really beautiful monograms in just a few minutes. So I highly recommend watching that stream. You can watch that anytime. There we go. And submit your images on Discord. I'm going to be reviewing some of the entries in about 15 minutes. Fantastic. So you can see I'm just clone stamping out this. It's getting a little bit messy here. So what you can do is, let's just create a new layer. I'm just going to grab my brush tool, B for the brush tool. All right. And then we're going to paint with like a 20% flow. Let me just go to our brush settings here. Turn on pen pressure. There we go. All right. And we're just going to go ahead and brush tool some of these things in. So the brush tool, surprisingly useful even where you have areas that have a lot of detail, like this. All right. Basically, I'm going to paint in the base colors. And then we're going to paint in the lines over top of the base colors. All right. Cool. And I'm doing my best to balance the timing as well, because obviously we could do a perfect job on this, but it just might take like 20 or 30 minutes to do that. And I want to make sure we have a lot of other things we cover too. So that's just kind of one of those things, you know, as creatives, we're always balancing, you know, how much time something takes. And in this case, I also want to make sure I show you guys a bunch of cool things. Plus the main focus here is in Lightroom. So I want to get back into Lightroom and show you guys some of the other really great features that I love and use. There we go. So I'm just painting all that with the brush tool. All right, and it's looking pretty good. Now we just need to create a new layer over top of that. And I'm gonna hit L for my lasso tool. Sorry, we're gonna use our marquee tool. I'm just gonna make a very thin black line. So nice and thin. And let's just fill that with black. There we go. So we have a very thin black line now. And I'm able to take this thin black line and rotate it around. So let's hit Control-Command-T. We're going to rotate this. All right, and like just rebuild the lines over top of our image. So Control-Command-J is going to allow me to duplicate that. All right, and this is what I would consider a relatively complicated object removal because we did have people and their shadows and everything, and then we have lines in the background. But I hope this kind of opens up your eyes to see what you can do as far as object removal in Photoshop is concerned. There we go. All right, Control or Command J to duplicate that again. All right, and we're almost done here. Probably another 2 minutes left, and we'll be good to go. I just have to make these black lines a little bit more subtle. There we go, and bring everything together. So we have all of our black lines now. I'm gonna hit Shift and click on all those layers. We're gonna hit Control or Command E to merge them together. Okay, then I'm gonna hit Control or Command L for levels. We'll just make the black lines not as dark. There we are. And we'll just put a layer mask on those. And let's just go ahead and set this to multiply. There we are. Looking really good. And then we'll just do a couple horizontal lines. All right, and you see I'm just gonna kind of make this a little bit wider here. All right, and then we got one more trick up our sleeve after we're done with this. I'm just gonna apply some noise over top of this. There we go. So let's create a new layer. I'm gonna go to M for our marquee tool. I'm gonna hit Shift Delete to fill this with 50% gray. Then we're gonna go ahead and change this from normal to a soft light layer. And I'm gonna go to Filter, Noise, and we're gonna go to Add Noise. There we go. So you can see I just added noise. Let's go down to about 10% noise. All right, and you can see that just makes it look a little bit more photographic and takes away some of the like brush tooling that we did. All right, so there we go. We are good to go with removed all of our subjects, and I think this is looking really, really great. Let's go ahead and just remove that lighting on the right-hand side as well. So I hope this kind of opens your eyes to the possibilities of what you can do with your photos, especially in terms of object removal, because we actually removed quite a bit. So let's go ahead and save this out. And the whole thing about this that's just super cool is that we can go ahead and save this, and then it automatically brings it back into Photoshop. All right, there we go. Automatically brings it back into Lightroom, I should say. So check this out. Here we are in the Lightroom with our after image. So let's go ahead and just take a look at our before and our after. I'm gonna click on the two images and hit C for compare. There we go. And here we can see. So the image on the right is actually our before. So our before is on the right. Let me see, I think I can swap these out. Swap them. There we go. I like it when the before is on the left and the after is on the right. Okay, so look at these beautiful, beautiful changes that we were able to make to this photograph. So here on the left-hand side, you can see the pagoda itself was relatively dark. We're missing a lot of information in here. We have this big bright light over here in the hotel, and this light over here, and this other pagoda. There's so many things that are pulling our attention in different places that it becomes really hard as a viewer to simply focus on one area. And generally that's what you want when creating your composition. You want to help guide your viewer to a certain area of your photo. And you do that through things like lighting and composition and object removal. You can do that, what you could do in this case is you could just also wait until there's no people and then take that picture as well. So you don't have to only remove objects in Photoshop. You could, if there's a piece of litter in your shot that you want it gone, you can actually just like go grab it and move it out too. So you can do manual Photoshop in real life as well. You don't have to just do this in Photoshop and Lightroom. But I do want to open your eyes to the possibilities of what you can do. All right, fantastic. And Tails says, wouldn't it be easy to use the clone using vanishing point tool for those lines? Probably, yeah, that would have been a really good option too. So just goes to show there are more than one way to do just about anything in both Lightroom and in Photoshop. But I'm really happy with our before and after. I think we've done a really, really nice job. So the next thing I want to show you is we're going to be adding some light trails to this image here. And we're going to be doing a little bit of enhancement here in Lightroom, and I do want to bring this in Photoshop as well, because there are a couple really cool tools that we're going to show you how to do, and this will be pretty quick. So first things first, let's go ahead and change our crop and our composition just a little bit. I'm going to change this down to a square crop. So let's go to our develop module. There's just a lot here on the top part of the photograph that isn't really helping to tell the story. You can see all this information up here is just kind of like, there's just not much up there. And the story is down here with all these like really nice lights kind of moving through space. So we're going to start off, I'm going to hit R for the crop tool in Lightroom, and we're going to go over to our aspect ratio. I'm just going to make this a square crop. There we go. So still kind of like looking at the image and using the rule of thirds to decide exactly where I want my crop to be. There we go. And we're just going to bring this up, and I think this is actually looking really good. So especially with modern day cameras, the megapixel count is so crazy that you can crop into your image pretty substantially and still get a lot of good detail. So we're going to crop in again for a couple of reasons. One is because this information on the top just kind of doesn't really add that much to the photograph. And the other is we're creating a focal point right here with our image as well. So we're using the rule of thirds in this case to create that focal point. So basically the rule of thirds states that everywhere, if you break your image up into thirds both horizontally and vertically, that everywhere you have an intersection of those lines, that is where you kind of want to put a focal point of your image. Okay, and you don't have to put one at every rule of thirds, but at least one of those rule of thirds should contain your focal point. So my focal point here is right up there on the top left, and that is aligning with this crosshair. So let's go ahead and hit enter, and we can see the composition is just a little bit cleaner now. We don't have a lot of information on the right-hand side that's distracting us. We're kind of being led right to there, and I think this is looking great. So let's go to our develop module. I'm just going to bring up our contrast a little bit. There we go, because it's a night scene. There we go. And we're just going to go ahead and bring up our vibrance a little bit. There we go. Kerwin says, I swear Aaron looks different every time I see him. LOL. I know, I feel the same way. I'm always looking in the mirror and be like, yep, you look different. Pretty funny. Just like, I feel like as an artist, I'm always changing up my art form, and for some reason that just usually reflects in my personal appearance as well. So kind of fun. Anyway, let's go ahead and jump in. We're going to do some cool lighting effects in Photoshop. So let's right click on this. We're going to go to edit in, and we're going to just say edit in Photoshop CC 2020, because I want to show you some really cool things you can do with lighting. Very, very simple, but this image is kind of inspiring me because we have so many beautiful light rays in this photograph already that just in like, we're just going to spend a couple minutes on this and then we'll get into our daily creative challenge. I just want to show you some really cool things you can do. So I'm going to hit P for the pen tool. We're going to go ahead and click and drag to make a pen path. Okay. And we're going to make it basically try to follow, there we go, try to follow these light rays. So that's my goal here. I want it to have the same arc as the light rays. Okay, and that's looking really, really good. And there we go. Let's go ahead and click right here. and close it back to the original. Control or Command click on this point here, and there we go. It's just gonna kind of disappear off into the horizon. Okay, now let's go ahead and take these points over here, just kind of move them out. All right, I think this is looking really good. So now that we have this, basically this pen path here, we're gonna right click on it. I'm gonna go to Make Selection. All right, let's go ahead and feather this by about 0.5 pixels. And then on a new layer, we're just gonna grab our brush tool, and I wanna paint with a nice bright color on my brush tool here. There we go. Fantastic. Let's go ahead and deselect by hitting Control or Command D. I'm gonna change this from normal to screen. All right. Actually, I kind of like overlay. Overlay looks pretty cool too. And what we can do is double click on this, and then we can grab an outer glow. So this are my layer effects, and outer glow is just gonna allow me to create a really nice kind of like glowing light source. So as you can see, the, there we go. That's looking really good. Just change my size up a little bit. All right, there we go. You can see that's starting to look really, really nice. And let's go ahead and just give this a little bit of a blur as well, because down here is just looking a little bit too sharp. So this is just a fun little technique that you can do to kind of enhance some of the light streaks in your image. I'm just doing this relatively quickly, but let's create a duplicate. Control or Command J is going to allow us to duplicate that out. And then I'm going to hit Control or Command T and then stretch that up in this direction as well. So now we have light glows. Let's just right click and go to warp. We have light glows that actually follow some of these images. There we go. That follow the original headlamps in our image. Isn't this cool? So I'm just kind of taking inspiration from the photograph itself. There we go. And we're just going to hit enter. All right, and check this out. So there's the before and the after. Again, it's just a really quick technique that we can kind of use to enhance, to enhance some of our photographs and give a little bit more of a glow. And of course, I can go in and I can change this glow color at any time. All we have to do is go into our layer effects and just choose a different color. But now we just have a little bit more of an enhanced, there we go. We have a little bit more of an enhanced effect with the lighting in our image. I think that looks really cool. Oh, let's go ahead and move it back to where it was. And you can see I did this in literally 4 minutes. Mia says, that's really cool. It is cool, right? Especially for this kind of thing. I just want to show you the possibilities of what you can do with your images in Photoshop and in Lightroom. So I went ahead and saved it out. Let's hit G for our grid view here, and it should automatically pop up here in Lightroom. So let's go ahead and show you here, C for the compare tool. So here's our before and the after on the left. So again, just kind of taking some inspiration from our photographs and seeing how we can apply things like lighting effects or removing objects. Basically, my overall goal is to try to like kind of enhance these objects a little bit and give them a little bit of like an artistic feel. Alrighty. Well, I really hope you're enjoying this broadcast so far. We are going to just take a quick pause here and take a look at some of our daily creative challenge entries. So if you haven't already done so, right here on behance.net/live, you can actually find information on the very top of the chat on how to join the daily creative challenge. And I think it's going to be linked up here in the, linked up here as well in the chat. So let's go ahead and I'm going to open up Discord so we can take a look at some of our current challenges. There we go. And this was the monogram challenge, by the way, with Kathleen Martin from this morning. So if you haven't already done so, be sure to check that out because it's really a really great challenge. And she showed you how to add texture into your monograms. And as we can see, our first entry we're going to review here is from Jennifer, and this looks really great. So Jennifer, I'm guessing your last name maybe starts with a T, so JT would be your monogram. Beautiful use of font choice, by the way. I love how the J and the T work together here. And then you've also added all these beautiful details within the individual letters. And I know that Kathleen was showing how to use like a texture of concrete and then apply that over top of your lettering. And it looks like maybe you've used a similar technique as well. I think it came out great. You totally nailed it. I'm loving all these Sam Peterson art. So vocal in here, giving everyone some inspiration and cheering everyone on. I love it. There we go. Tracy G. Tracy, maybe your middle name starts with an A, so tag Tracy G. You're it. I love it. And here we can see we've got some different textures applied over top of our lettering as well. All right. Jesse Z. There we go. Really beautiful use of fonts. Here we can see that concrete texture in full effect with our background. We've got some very nice line work here on the Z. I love this J and the Z, how they're interacting with each other, and hope everything is going your way. You know what, Jesse? You too. I hope everything's going your way as well. There we are. Let's go ahead and take a look at Mi Amor Luna, challenge number 3 postcard. Loving this. I don't know where you guys are getting these fonts, but I want in because they are so cool. Look at this effect you made with that M. And then we've got an H here. I think this is looking really good. You've even got some lighting effects here on your lettering. Who knew monograms could be so cool? This is really, really nice. This S and the V, I think these are playing very well together. And it looks like we've got some canvas texture from Photoshop here on the background as well. Good luck. Thank you. I'll take it. Here we got Alfred going for a little bit more of like a off-kilter type of image with our letters kind of spaced apart there. There we go. And the A and the D look really good. Looks like we've got maybe like a little Celtic symbol. Oh, there's someone like screaming in the background. Interesting. I like it. Discipline is never an end in itself, only a means to an end. There we go. We could all use a little bit more discipline. And KA from Big Driv Viking. Looking good. And learning is fun. I completely agree with this. My middle name is Kerry, by the way, Kerry. So my initials are actually AK. So this is the opposite of my initials. So, you know, little hidden gem there. I'm digging that. Orange Bandito. I like your screen name, Orange Bandito. And we've got the OB to celebrate that as well on a beautiful background here. Man, there are so many. Hear Her Roar. Look at that. K and L looks really good. There are a lot of really great monograms are coming through today. Seance with the G and the R. I really like how you've mixed the two letters here where they overlap. It changes color. Very, very cool job. The H and the M. These letters are all so killer. No wall too big. I like how everyone's putting a little like letter on the bottom. We've got a Da Vinci here with a D and the H. Imagination makes us infinite. I agree. I'm not sure what this is down here. It looks like a little baby or something. I dig this drop shadow as well. FMC Hugh, day 3 monogram. Hello from California. Hello from Chicago. Loving it. I really love the overlap in lettering here. I think this is coming across very, very well. And your font choices are definitely working together. So just fantastic job. I'm not sure how many daily creative challenges are here. Michaela, Oleg, awesome job. Wawuzi. Yeah, I'm just going to, there we go. I think we got all the way up to the top. So as you can see, we are very active here on the Discord. So if you're interested in joining the Daily Creative Challenge, you can do so right here on Behance.net. We're going to put some instructions right here in the chat where you can view the Daily Creative Challenge. You can take a look at some of the past challenges as well, and then just tune in basically every morning this month. Kathleen is doing a great job with those Daily Creative Challenges, and they're coming along at 11. So let's go ahead and take a look at our schedule here. Okay, and here we can see the Daily Creative Challenge in Photoshop was at 9 a.m. Okay, and that's Pacific Standard Time. You're hanging out with me, Photo Retouching with Aaron Nace. Next, we have an Illustrator Daily Creative Challenge with Andrew. So if we have any illustrators out there, this is a perfect time for you guys to get involved. We've got our editorial design with Shanti. That's going to be a lot of fun. The Adobe XD Creative Challenge, which I'm going to join because I want to learn Adobe XD. I haven't really used it much, but there's so many cool things you can do. Taking a drink of water here. And we've got Doodle Therapy with Alice Lee, something that I think I could definitely use a little bit of in my personal life. And then we got our design off with Voodoo Val and Wade. So if you, if you're hanging out inside today, maybe you're doing something creative, what I like to do personally, this is like my personal hangout here. I actually like to have a 2-monitor setup. So I've got one monitor where I'm doing my own creative work. And then I've got another monitor where I've got Adobe Live playing, behance.net/live. And for me, it kind of feels like I'm hanging out with my friends and they're doing cool stuff, editing on the computer, and I'm editing, and we're just kind of hanging out together. Now, if you don't have 2 screens on your computer, that's totally okay, because you could stream this from your phone or a tablet, or maybe you have a laptop and a desktop. So there are a lot of different ways to do it. But yeah, I just kind of think it's a lot of fun to be creating yourself and then have another creator doing something live. And I always learn something, even from these streams where, people are teaching Photoshop, which is something that I've been using for many years. I always learn something, and I'm always getting inspired by what all these other amazing artists are doing out there. So even if it's a cross-disciplinary thing, I think that's the time when I learn the most. Like if I watch a lot of illustrators, who are doing drawing and illustration. It's not something that I do a lot, but I draw a lot of inspiration from seeing them work. So just a little heads up on how I like to watch Adobe Live here, and maybe that's the same for you. Alrighty, well, let's get back into learning some Lightroom here. Alrighty, so let's hit G for the grid view here. Really cool stuff. I hope you guys are enjoying today's stream. We've got about 15 minutes left here. Next thing we want to show you is editing an underwater photo. So let's go ahead and double click here. Okay, we've got another image. This is by Pierre T. Lambert. Looking really good here. This underwater photo. There we go. And fantastic. So what we want to do is, as you can see with an underwater photo, there's not a lot of contrast in this image because you're actually like photographing through water. So when we bring this into Lightroom, basically the first thing we want to do is help like add some contrast to this image, enhance the lights in the dark. So let's go to our develop module. Now, in this case, as you can see, we actually don't have any issues with dynamic range. So that's something that's pretty cool about working underwater, is that we don't have, nowhere in this photo is too light or too dark. So doing an HDR in this case is not at all necessary because this is totally within the dynamic range of our image. In fact, we can take a look up here at the very top right at my histogram, and you can see that all of my information is well contained in my histogram. So that means we've captured all the information. We're good to go. So the first thing that I want to kind of highlight here in Lightroom is that there is an auto button right near tone. And for a long time, personally, I've been like, I am staying away from the auto. I'm going to do it myself. I'm going to choose all the best settings myself. And how could auto ever know what to do? But I'll tell you, over the last couple of years, they've done a lot of work on these auto features, and these programs keep getting smarter and smarter, and auto actually does a good job. And this is, I consider myself, well, I've been editing and post-processing for over 15 years, okay? So for me, I'm like, I'll do the manual way, but I've actually been very impressed with the auto as well. So don't feel like hitting the auto button in one of these programs is a bad thing. Even if you're, if you're out there taking pictures and you can't get the right settings on your camera, don't worry about using auto. That's totally okay. I use it too, okay? So these auto settings, they're there for you. They're there to help, especially in situations where you just need a little bit of help. So let's just click on auto and see what it does. You can always fine tune there from there. So let's click on auto. And there we go. You see it made it a little bit brighter. So it did adjust our exposure. That I'm not like, there we go. I didn't think we needed as much exposure, so we're gonna bring that down. But all my other settings here look pretty good. Now, I do want just to give this a little bit more punch. I wanna have more separation between the light and the dark in my images. So we're gonna just take our contrast slider and drag this from the left to the right. And that's gonna give our image all that much more punch. Now, if you want this to happen on a smaller scale, that's when you bring up your clarity. So let's go ahead and bring up clarity. And here we can see, yes, now we're starting to see it, right? I'm also gonna bring up our vibrance, which is gonna be really, really nice for these blues. Now, this is an underwater photo, so that means that the camera was in an underwater housing. And what happens a lot of the time with underwater housing is that you're basically photographing through another layer of like plexiglass. In most underwater houses, it's plexiglass. So you get a lot of vignetting. So the areas around the corners of your image actually wind up quite a bit darker than the rest of your frame. And like a wide angle lens on your camera will introduce things like vignetting as well, but we can counterbalance that here in Photoshop. So I'm just gonna scroll, or in Lightroom rather, I'm just gonna scroll down to where it says lens corrections, okay? And we're gonna just click on remove chromatic aberration and then enable profile corrections. And look at that. Let's just turn this off and on. So there's the before and the after. So the coolest thing about these programs is that it actually reads the information from those cameras and the lenses. So you can see this is a Sony FE and the lens used was a 16-35. And what they actually do is they take pictures with camera and lens combinations and then use that as like a guide on how to reverse things like barrel distortion and how to remove vignetting as well. So we can see in this case, it's done a really good job. Let's just show you the before and after again. So there's a before. You can see we do have some barrel distortion going on and our image is getting pretty dark around the edges. And in the after, it's removed basically all of that for us, which is so, so cool. So they're just absolutely great tools. Now, we do have a little bit of a dark corner here on the bottom, and that's totally okay. You can crop in a little bit if you want, or you could take it into Photoshop and do a content aware fill. I'm gonna hit, we're just gonna crop this in a little bit. So I'm gonna hit R for the crop tool. There we go. And we're just gonna crop it in. There we go. Keeping the same aspect ratio. So we're just gonna hold Shift to keep that same aspect ratio. Fantastic. And I wanna make sure he's got plenty of room. And after all, kind of like all of the really nice information in this image. There we go. I'm just deciding between this and that. Let's try that crop there. He's a little bit too close to the right-hand side. So let's hit R. I'm gonna pop him right in the center there. There we go. A little bit off. There we go. Let's put his head right about there for the rule of thirds and give us a little bit more space on the bottom. All right. I'm always like trying to get the right crops here. But as you can see, I can still zoom in. I've got plenty of detail left in this photograph and we're looking good. So here's our before. Let's just click on this side by side here to show our before and after. So as you can see, underwater photos just need a little bit of help in post-production because you're photographing through water and things like that. So here's the before on the left and the after on the right. You can see we have a much more dynamic image and that is looking fantastic. All right, let's hit G for our grid view. Now what happens in this case, there we go, we're gonna hit D for the develop module. What happens in this case where we actually have some of our subject above water and some of our subject below water? Well, we can use our graduated filters to target just below or just above. So let's go to our graduated filter here. I'm gonna click and drag from the bottom up. Now I'm gonna click right here and drag up because I just want my transition area to be right around the center of that surface. And look at this. Who'd have thought, right? Basically just the graduated filter. Now I can make some contrast adjustments. I can make some exposure adjustments. I can do this, some clarity, and all of this is happening just to the bottom of the image. So where we have this, you know, line between before and after. By the way, my good friend Pierre took this photograph, and look at all those sharks in the water. What? Pierre, you are a mad man. I can't believe it. I don't know. I think I'd be too scared to get in the water with all those sharks. Ooh. Oh, I don't know, man. What about you guys? Has anyone gotten in the water with sharks on purpose like this? Maybe you guys are a lot braver than me. That's really scary. Even just looking at this picture makes me nervous. I don't know. I'm not afraid of like a lot of animals, but I'm just like, every time I think about a shark, I'm like, no chance. Like me versus shark wins every time. So I don't know that I would do this, but it did wind up with a cool photo, and Pierre still has his legs. So it did wind up actually working out. But I don't know if I'd be brave enough to do it. Let's go ahead and adjust our saturation here as well. All right, I think this is looking really great. And then I'm gonna create a new graduated filter there, and we're just gonna click and drag from the top right down and just brighten this up a little bit. And that's just gonna kind of create this nice like light flare in this image. We're just gonna bring our contrast down. Maybe we'll bring it up a little bit. There we go. Looking really, really good. So you can see it's very easy to target different areas of your images. Let's just show you the before and after. We have to click off our graduated filter there. There we go. Click off our graduated filter, and here we can see the before and after. So really very, very simple adjustments just with the graduated filter, and I'm able to adjust the underwater and the above water completely separately just using our graduated filter. So I think that these tools are just absolutely indispensable, and I'm 100% on board. Cheryl Howard says, no sharks for me. Yeah, Cheryl, you and I can go on vacation together. We'll be in the boat. Someone else can go in the water and hang out with the sharks. I'll say, hey, good job. You look great over there. I'll edit your pictures for you. How's that? So really, really cool use here. Let's just show you one more use case example here. All right, we're gonna do our develop module, and I'm gonna keep the before on the left. So let's just grab our graduated filter. Now I don't really want to click from the bottom and go up like this, because this is just gonna start my effect here. It's gonna go halfway to here and then end here. I want to bring this up so we actually have most of our effect underwater, and then it's just gonna gradually go and fade away for the above water. There we go. So let's bring our exposure up a little bit. We'll bring our contrast up. There we go. Fantastic. I'm gonna bring our clarity up, which is just kind of always helpful when you're doing underwater shots, to bring your clarity up. And we're gonna bring our sharpness up as well. All right. Kerwin says, swimming with sharks isn't that bad if you make it back in one piece. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's totally fine if you just get really lucky and the sharks are nice. No, I don't think that sharks necessarily want to hurt humans. I just know that I would have no chance defending myself. So let's go ahead and just drag another adjustment layer, kind of coming from the top down there. And fantastic. So you can see I'm able to adjust each one of these kind of separately. And look at that before and after. That's just 2 graduated filters here in Lightroom. Very, very easy. Really cool before and after, and you can see all of our beautiful detail. I thought that was actually some dust on the lens, but look at that, it's fish. We have fish in this photograph that I couldn't really even see on the left-hand side. So when we make things brighter and increase the sharpening and the contrast, it actually can reveal new details in your photos as well. So really, really nice use of just a couple graduated filters to kind of enhance our photographs. All right, well, we're almost done. We've got one more image that I want to edit here, and this is a volcano photographed at night. Can you believe this? What? I think Pierre was in Costa Rica for this image. And by the way, if you guys haven't already done so, be sure to check out Pierre's Instagram and his YouTube. I'm just gonna link you up here one more time in the chat. Pierre was gracious enough. There we go. He was gracious enough to donate his images so we could work on them today. I am going to just go ahead and crop this in with a square crop. So let's go to our develop module, click on our crop tool, and we're going to use the square crop. There we go. So I can just kind of get nice and close into, you know, hey, what's the interesting part of the photograph, right? There we go. Hit R again if you want to adjust it, and I'm going to just pull that off to the left a little bit there. Fantastic. And let's go ahead and take a look at our before and after. We're going to continue making some adjustments to the after. There we go. Let's go ahead. I'm going to click on auto to give us a start. Ooh, that actually looked pretty cool. Let's bring our highlights down a little bit more. I want to bring my contrast up just a little bit more. I don't mind if I lose some information. The little bit of contrast boost I think is going to work out really, really nice. And then I actually want to do a little bit of a glow around the volcano. So let's click on our adjustment brush here, and I'm just going to paint right around the volcano. Check this out. I can just paint exactly where I want this glow to be. I'm going to just bring our color temperature up a little bit warmer. We're going to bring our tint to the right as well. There we go. Let's just erase it around the edges a little bit. All right, to make this nice and fade out there. So it's there we go. A little bit more of a subtle effect. All right, looking really good. And there we go. Let's just bring up our saturation a little bit. Okay. I think this is so, so cool. And this is something that you can most definitely do. There we go. Just giving a little bit of a glow overall to that area. And I'm going to bring down our contrast, which is going to help sell the effect of the glow. Woo! Nature's fireworks, huh? Look at that. I've never personally seen anything like this in my life, and I would love to. An erupting volcano. I'm going to just add a new adjustment brush, and I'm just going to up the exposure a little bit. We're going to do some dodging and burning here in the clouds. There we go. So, so cool. All right, we'll just click on the eraser to kind of fade this in a little bit. And man, overall, I think this is looking fantastic. Let's just bring our color temperature. I'm gonna make it a little bit cooler. There we go. Oh, and it's time to end. Thanks, everyone.